Welcome to Crime 99, where we bring you the darkest tales from the depths of the human psyche. Today, prepare yourself for a chilling journey into the heart of terror with our feature presentation, The Haunting of St. Agnes Convent. In the shadows of an ancient abbey, Sister Catherine and her companions confront the malevolent force that lurks within. Join us as we unravel the secrets of St. Agnes Convent and face the horrors that lie in wait. In the heart of the countryside, nestled among rolling hills and ancient forests, stood St. Agnes Convent, a towering structure of weathered stone and imposing spires. For centuries, it had stood as a beacon of faith and devotion, its halls echoing with the prayers of generations of devoted nuns. But beneath its serene facade lay a dark and twisted history, whispered of in hushed tones by those who dared to speak its name. The legend of St. Agnes Convent began centuries ago. In a time when the world was a far different place, the convent had been founded by Mother Superior Agnes herself, a woman of unwavering faith and unshakable resolve. Under her guidance, the convent flourished, becoming a sanctuary for those seeking solace and redemption in a world torn apart by war and strife. But as the years passed, darkness began to creep into the convent's hallowed halls. It started with rumors, whispers of strange happenings in the dead of night, of voices echoing through the corridors when no one was there to speak. At first, the nuns dismissed these tales as nothing more than idle gossip, the product of overactive imaginations and too much time spent in solitude. But then came the night of the storm, a night that would forever be etched into the annals of St. Agnes Convent's history. It was a night like any other, or so the nuns thought, until the sky erupted in a fury of lightning and thunder, casting the world into darkness and chaos. As the storm raged outside, the nuns gathered in the chapel, seeking refuge from the tempest that raged outside. But as they prayed for deliverance, a sense of unease settled over the convent, like a dark cloud hanging over their heads. And then, in the midst of the storm, came the sound of footsteps echoing through the empty corridors, growing louder and more insistent with each passing moment. The nuns froze, their hearts pounding in their chests as they listened to the approaching footsteps, their minds racing with fear and uncertainty. And then, just as suddenly as they had begun, the footsteps stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that seemed to stretch on for an eternity. The nuns exchanged nervous glances, their hands clasped tightly together in silent prayer as they waited for whatever horror lurked in the darkness to reveal itself. But nothing came. The storm raged on outside, its fury unabated, but within the convent walls, all was quiet once more. And yet, despite the apparent calm, the nuns could not shake the feeling that something had changed, that a darkness had been awakened within the convent, a darkness that threatened to consume them all. In the days that followed, strange things began to happen at St. Agnes Convent. Objects went missing, only to reappear in strange places. Lights flickered and died, their glow snuffed out by an unseen force. And the whispers, oh, the whispers, they seemed to follow the nuns wherever they went, their voices filled with malice and menace. Some said that the convent was cursed, that it was built upon a burial ground or a site of ancient pagan worship, and that the spirits of the dead were rising up to seek vengeance upon the living. Others claimed that it was the work of the devil himself, his dark influence seeping into the very walls of the convent, twisting and corrupting all that it touched. But whatever the truth may be, one thing was certain. St. Agnes Convent was no longer a place of sanctuary and solace, but a prison of fear and despair, where the spirits of the dead walked freely among the living. their whispers echoing through the halls like a haunting melody from beyond the grave. And it was into this darkness that Sister Mary Elizabeth was born, a woman whose faith was as unwavering as it was unyielding, whose devotion to her calling bordered on obsession. From a young age, she had felt a calling to the convent, drawn to its walls by a force she could not name or understand. As she grew older, Sister Mary Elizabeth's faith only deepened, until it became the driving force behind everything she did. She spent her days in prayer and meditation, seeking guidance and wisdom from the divine, her mind consumed by visions of heaven and hell, of angels and demons locked in eternal battle for the souls of mankind. But as the darkness continued to spread throughout the convent, Sister Mary Elizabeth found herself plagued by doubts and fears, her once unshakable faith beginning to falter in the face of the horrors that surrounded her. She prayed for deliverance, for salvation, but no answer came, only silence, cold and empty, like the void that stretched out before her. And then came the night of the storm, a night that would change everything. As the storm raged outside, Sister Mary Elizabeth locked herself in the chapel, her mind consumed by visions of fire and brimstone, of sinners burning in the depths of hell. She prayed for forgiveness, for redemption, but her prayers fell on deaf ears, lost in the howling wind and crushing thunder. And then, in the midst of her despair, came a voice that whispered words of comfort and solace, promising salvation to those who would only listen. Sister Mary Elizabeth listened, her heart filled with hope, as the voice spoke of a new beginning, of a world free from pain and suffering, where the righteous would be rewarded and the wicked punished for their sins. But as the voice grew louder and more insistent, Sister Mary Elizabeth realized with horror that it was not the voice of God that spoke to her, but something far darker and more sinister. She tried to banish the voice from her mind, to cast out the darkness that threatened to consume her soul. But it was too late. The seed of doubt had been planted, and it would grow and fester until it consumed her completely. And so it was that Sister Mary Elizabeth locked herself in the chapel, her mind consumed by madness and despair, her cries for mercy falling on deaf ears as the storm raged on outside. And when the nuns finally ventured into the chapel, they found her kneeling before the altar, her eyes wide with terror, and her lips moving in silence prayer. But it was not the voice of God that filled the chapel that night, but the whispers of the dead, the echoes of centuries of pain and suffering, of souls lost and forgotten in the darkness. And as the nuns looked upon Sister Mary Elizabeth's lifeless form, they knew that the darkness that had consumed her was not something that could be banished with prayers and holy water, but something far more insidious and malevolent, something that lurked in the shadows, waiting to claim its next victim. In the days that followed Sister Mary Elizabeth's tragic demise, a pall of darkness settled over St. Agnes Convent, casting its shadow over the once hallowed halls, and chilling the hearts of all who dwelt within its walls. The nuns whispered in hushed tones of the events that had transpired, their voices filled with fear and uncertainty, as they tried to make sense of the horrors that had unfolded before their eyes. But try as they might to forget, the memory of Sister Mary Elizabeth lingered like a spectre in their midst, her presence a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked within the convent's walls. Some claimed to have seen her ghost wandering the corridors at night, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light as she searched for peace in the afterlife. Others spoke of strange happenings, objects moving of their own accord, doors slamming shut without warning, and whispers echoing through the darkness when no one was there to speak. The nuns tried to dismiss these tales as nothing more than idle gossip, the product of overactive imaginations and too much time spent in isolation. But deep down, they knew that something was terribly wrong. that an evil force had taken root within the convent, twisting and corrupting all that it touched. And then came the night of the full moon, a night that would forever be etched into the annals of St. Agnes Convent's history, as the moon rose high in the sky, casting its silvery light over the convent's ancient walls. A sense of dread settled over the nuns, like a heavy blanket suffocating the air. It started with a sound, a low, mournful wail that echoed through the corridors like the cry of a lost soul. At first, the nuns dismissed it as nothing more than the wind playing tricks on their ears. But as the sound grew louder and more insistent, they realized with growing horror that it was something far more sinister. The voice of Sister Mary Elizabeth, crying out from beyond the grave. Terrified, the nuns gathered in the chapel, their hearts pounding in their chests as they listened to the ghostly wails echoing through the darkness. They prayed for deliverance, for salvation, but their prayers fell on deaf ears, lost in the void that stretched out before them. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the wailing stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that seemed to stretch on for an eternity. The nuns exchanged nervous glances, their hands clasped tightly together in silent prayer as they waited for whatever horror lurked in the darkness to reveal itself. But nothing came. The chapel remained empty, its walls bathed in the soft glow of candlelight as the nuns huddled together, their minds racing with fear and uncertainty. And yet, despite the apparent calm, they could not shake the feeling that something had changed, that a darkness had been awakened within the convent, a darkness that threatened to consume them all. In the days that followed, strange things began to happen at St. Agnes Convent. Objects went missing, only to reappear in strange places. Lights flickered and died, their glow snuffed out by an unseen force. And the whispers, oh, the whispers, they seemed to follow the nuns wherever they went. Their voices filled with malice and menace. Some said that the convent was cursed, that it was built upon a burial ground or a site of ancient pagan worship, and that the spirits of the dead were rising up to seek vengeance upon the living. Others claimed that it was the work of the devil himself, his dark influence seeping into the very walls of the convent, twisting and corrupting all that it touched. But whatever the truth may be, one thing was certain. St. Agnes Convent was no longer a place of sanctuary and solace, but a prison of fear and despair, where the spirits of the dead walked freely among the living, their whispers echoing through the halls like a haunting melody from beyond the grave. And as the nuns struggled to come to terms with the horrors that surrounded them, they knew that the darkness that had taken root within the convent's walls would not rest until it had claimed them all. In the depths of St. Agnes Convent, amidst the winding catacombs shrouded in darkness, Sister Catherine and her companions stood, their hearts heavy with the burden of their recent encounter. Though they had confronted the darkness that plagued the convent, their victory felt hollow, their relief fleeting in the face of the realization that the true source of the evil still lurked in the shadows, waiting to strike again. The flickering torches cast eerie shadows on the cold stone walls as they made their way back towards the surface, their footsteps echoing through the empty corridors like whispers of the unseen horrors that lurked within. Sister Catherine led the way, her brow furrowed in concentration as she pondered their next move. Beside her, Sister Margaret walked with a sense of unease, her eyes darting nervously from shadow to shadow as if expecting some unseen terror to leap out at any moment. Brother Thomas, the youngest of their group, clutched his crucifix tightly in one hand, his knuckles white with tension, as he tried to quell the rising sense of dread that threatened to consume him. As they reached the chapel, a sense of foreboding washed over them like a tidal wave. the air thick with the palpable presence of malevolence. Sister Catherine's heart sank. She beheld the ghostly figure of Sister Mary Elizabeth, her form twisted and contorted with rage and despair. The spectral nun glided towards them with a haunting grace, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light, as she loomed over them in the vengeful spectre from beyond the grave. With a cry of terror, the nuns turned and fled from the chapel, their minds reeling with visions of doom and despair as they sought refuge in the safety of their cells. But even there, they could find no solace, for the darkness followed them, its presence a constant reminder of the horrors that lurked just beyond the edge of their perception. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, but the darkness refused to relent, its grip on the convent tightening with each passing day. The once vibrant halls of St. Agnes Convent now lay abandoned and desolate, their grandeur reduced to crumbling ruins, as the malevolent force continued to spread its tendrils throughout the ancient structure. As the nuns huddled together in their cells, their hearts heavy with fear and uncertainty, Sister Catherine knew that they could not hide from the darkness forever. With a heavy sigh, she rose to her feet, her resolve steeling as she vowed to confront the evil that had plagued the convent, once and for all. Gathering her companions around her, Sister Catherine outlined her plan to banish the darkness from St. Agnes Convent once and for all. They would venture deep into the catacombs, to the very heart of the darkness itself, and confront the source of the evil that had taken root within the convent's walls. With torches held aloft and crosses clutched tightly in their hands, Sister Catherine and her companions descended into the depths of the catacombs, their footsteps echoing through the darkness. As they pressed ever onward, the air grew colder with each step they took, a tangible sense of dread hanging heavy in the air as they delved deeper into the bowels of the earth. Suddenly, without warning, they found themselves standing before a massive stone door, its surface etched with ancient runes and symbols. With a sense of trepidation, Sister Catherine reached out and pushed open the door, revealing a vast chamber bathed in an eerie blue light. At the center of the chamber stood Sister Mary Elizabeth, her spectral form twisted and contorted with rage as she glared at them with eyes filled with malice. With a cry of defiance, Sister Catherine raised her cross high into the air and began to recite the words of a powerful exorcism, her voice ringing out through the chamber like a clarion call. As she spoke, the very air seemed to crackle with energy, the ancient runes on the walls glowing with a faint light as they responded to her words. With a final cry of anguish, Sister Mary Elizabeth's ghost was banished back into the depths of the abyss from whence it came, her cries echoing through the chamber like the fading echoes of a dying scream. With the darkness banished and the evil that had plagued the convent vanquished, Sister Catherine and her companions emerged from the catacombs, their hearts light with the knowledge that they had triumphed over the forces of darkness. As they made their way back to the surface, the sun broke through the clouds, bathing the convent in its warm golden light once more. And though the memory of the horrors that had unfolded within its walls would never truly fade, St. Agnes Convent was finally at peace, its halls silent and still as the darkness that had once plagued it was banished from the earth forevermore. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest investigations into the world of horror.